Cynthia Williams stood in the rain outside the animal shelter, staring through the chain-link fence at a scarred pit bull mix that no one wanted to adopt. The dog sat alone in the far corner of the concrete run, his one good eye watching her with the same wariness she recognized in her own mirror, the look of someone who had learned not to trust, not to hope, not to expect kindness from a world that had shown them little. The shelter volunteer, a young white woman with perfectly styled blonde hair, barely looked up from her clipboard when Cynthia approached the front desk. "We're closed for adoptions today," the woman said dismissively. "You'll need to come back tomorrow. The sign says you're open until 5. It's 4:30. The volunteer finally looked at Cynthia aerially, looked at her taking in her dark skin, her worn clothes, her beat-up Honda parked outside. "Ma'am, I think you might want to consider a different shelter. Our adoption fees are quite expensive, and that particular dog has special needs." Cynthia felt the familiar burn of assumptions being made about her based on her appearance. 55 years old, and people still looked at her and saw only what they expected to see. What kind of special needs? Well, he's missing an eye from a dogfighting ring. He's aggressive with other animals. He needs expensive medical care. And honestly, he's just not very adoptable. Cynthia looked back at the dog, who was still watching her through the fence. Something in his posture reminded her of herself at 17, sitting in a Navy recruiter's office, desperate to escape a house where her own family members called her names and worse things happened in the dark. If you're finding this story meaningful, please subscribe to our channel and hit that like button. Stories about second chances and healing need to be shared, and your support helps us reach people who need to hear them. "I'd like to meet him." The volunteer sighed dramatically. "Ma'am, I really don't think this is a good match. This dog requires someone with extensive experience with traumatized animals." "I have experience with trauma. Pet trauma is very different from—" "I'm a Navy veteran," Cynthia interrupted. 21 years of service. I think I can handle a scared dog." The volunteer's expression shifted slightly, but not in the way Cynthia had hoped. Instead of respect, she saw skepticism. "You were in the Navy?" "Petty Officer First Class Cynthia Williams, retired." "Well, that's nice, but this dog really needs someone with the financial resources to handle his medical bills." Cynthia pulled out her VA disability card and her bank statement. "I have full medical retirement and disability benefits. I can afford whatever care he needs." The volunteer glanced at the documents, clearly uncomfortable with having her assumptions challenged. "Ma'am, it's not just about money. This dog has behavioral issues. He doesn't get along with people very well. Maybe he just hasn't met the right person yet." What would you do if you encountered this kind of treatment at an animal shelter? Would you push back, or would you walk away? Let me know in the comments what you think Cynthia should do. 20 minutes of bureaucratic resistance later, Cynthia finally stood in the concrete run facing the one-eyed pit bull. He was larger than she'd expected, maybe 60 pounds, with scars crisscrossing his face and neck. His remaining eye studied her carefully. "Hey there, soldier," she said quietly, sitting down on the wet concrete despite her clean clothes. "I know that, look. You're wondering if I'm going to hurt you, aren't you?" The dog didn't move, but his ears twitched slightly at her voice. "I get it. People have been disappointing you your whole life, making promises they don't keep, hurting you when you trusted them." She held out her hand, palm up, and waited. The dog sniffed the air, but didn't approach. "You know what I learned in 21 years in the Navy? Sometimes the ones everybody else gives up on turn out to be the strongest fighters. Sometimes the ones with scars are the ones who understand loyalty best." The shelter volunteer watched through the fence, clearly expecting the dog to show aggression. Instead, after 5 minutes of patient waiting, the dog took one tentative step forward. "That's it," Cynthia murmured. "Nobody's rushing you. Take your time." The dog crept closer, his body language screaming caution. When he was close enough, Cynthia let him sniff her hand thoroughly before gently touching his head. The volunteer looked surprised. He's never let anyone do that before. Maybe he just needed someone who understands what it's like to be underestimated. Before I continue with what happened next, I need to ask, how old are you? This story touches on some difficult themes about trauma and recovery, and I want to make sure you're prepared for the emotional journey ahead. Drop your age in the comments. The adoption process took 3 hours. 3 hours of paperwork, background checks, home visit requirements, and condescending questions about whether Cynthia understood the responsibility of owning a difficult dog. "Ma'am, are you sure you want to take on this challenge?" The shelter director asked for the 4th time. "We have much more suitable dogs available, friendlier breeds, less damaged animals." "Sir, I spent 21 years in the Navy being told I wasn't suitable, that I was too damaged, too difficult, too much of a challenge. This dog and I understand each other. But surely you'd prefer..." "I prefer honesty over prejudice. And right now, you're showing me the same kind of judgment I faced my entire military career." The director looked uncomfortable. "I'm not sure what you mean." "You mean you can't see it? The way your staff looked at me when I walked in? The assumptions about whether I could afford the adoption fees? The suggestions that I should choose a friendlier dog?" The director glanced at the volunteer, who was suddenly very interested in her paperwork. "Ma'am, I assure you we don't discriminate." "Sir, I'm a black woman veteran trying to adopt a scarred pit bull that nobody else wants. If you can't see the parallels there, then you're missing the whole point of rescue work." The room fell silent, except for the sound of dogs barking in the background. After another hour of paperwork and a promise to bring the dog back for a wellness check in 2 weeks, Cynthia walked out of the shelter with her new companion. She had decided to name him Charlie, after her drill sergeant and boot camp pay tough man who had seen potential in her when everyone else saw a problem. What do you think is the most important thing Cynthia and Charlie can teach each other? What does it mean when 2 survivors find each other? Share your thoughts in the comments. The first weeks were challenging. Charlie had nightmares, flinching at sudden movements and loud noises. He wouldn't eat if anyone was watching. He hid under furniture whenever strangers came to the door. But Cynthia understood. She had her own nightmares, her own triggers, her own reasons for not trusting easily. "It's okay, boy," she would whisper when Charlie woke up whimpering in the middle of the night. "I know what it's like when sleep isn't safe." She told him about growing up in a house where her own cousins called her tar baby and worse. About a family member who came into her room at night when she was just a child. About joining the Navy at 17 because military service seemed safer than staying home. 21 years I served," she told Charlie as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. 21 years of being told I was too aggressive, too independent, too much trouble. Of being passed over for promotions because I didn't fit the culture. Of having my integrity questioned every time I reported harassment or discrimination. Charlie had gradually moved closer during these conversations, until he was sitting pressed against her leg. "You know what I learned, though? Sometimes being too much trouble just means you're strong enough to survive things that would break other people." The breakthrough came 6 weeks after the adoption. Cynthia was having a particularly bad PTSD episode triggered by a news report about sexual assault in the military when Charlie did something he'd never done before. Instead of hiding under the couch, he approached her carefully and rested his head on her lap. "You feel it too, don't you?" she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "You know when the darkness comes." From that day forward, they were inseparable. Charlie learned to read Cynthia's moods, positioning himself between her and strangers when her anxiety spiked. Cynthia learned to read Charlie's signals, knowing when he needed space and when he needed comfort. 3 months after the adoption, Cynthia received a call from the animal shelter. "Ms. Williams, this is Director Henderson. I wanted to check on how Charlie is doing." "He's doing wonderfully." "Why?" "Well, we've had several inquiries about him. Apparently, someone posted a video of you 2 at the dog park on social media, and it's gotten quite a bit of attention." Cynthia had no idea what he was talking about. She rarely used social media and had no memory of being filmed. "What kind of video?" "It shows Charlie protecting you when another dog owner's unleashed pit bull charged toward you. Charlie positioned himself between you and the aggressive dog, then calmly diffused the situation without any violence. The video has over 2 million views." Cynthia remembered the incident. An elderly white man had been walking his unleashed dog when it spotted Charlie and charged. Instead of fighting back, Charlie had simply stood his ground and used body language to communicate that he wasn't a threat but wouldn't be intimidated either. "The comments are incredible," Director Henderson continued. "People are calling Charlie a hero. They're saying he's an example of how rescue dogs can overcome their past with the right owner. What's the most powerful message about second chances and healing that you've taken from this story? How do trauma survivors help each other heal? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments. Director Henderson. Charlie isn't a hero because he's overcome his past. He's a hero because he never let his past define his future. Miss Williams, I owe you an apology. When you first came in, my staff and I made assumptions about you and about what kind of home Charlie needed. Yes, you did. We were wrong, completely wrong. You've given that dog something we never could have provided here. Understanding. Director Henderson, can I ask you something? Of course. How many other people like me have you turned away from adopting animals that needed them? The director was quiet for a long moment. I don't know, but after seeing what you've accomplished with Charlie, I think we need to examine our adoption practices. What do you mean? I mean, maybe we've been too focused on finding perfect homes for damaged animals instead of finding homes where people understand damage. 6 months later, Cynthia received an invitation that surprised her. The animal shelter wanted her to speak at their annual fundraising gala about the importance of matching traumatized animals with adopters who understand trauma. We've created a new program, Director Henderson explained. We're specifically recruiting veterans, abuse survivors, and people who have overcome significant challenges to adopt our most difficult cases. And how's it working? Our success rate with problem animals has increased by 60%. Turns out that people who have survived trauma are often the best equipped to help animals heal from trauma. Cynthia agreed to speak at the gala, but on one condition. Charlie would be there with her. The night of the event, Cynthia stood before an audience of wealthy donors and community leaders, with Charlie sitting calmly beside her. Most of you look at Charlie and see a success story, she began. You see a damaged dog who was rescued and rehabilitated. But that's not Charlie's story. The audience leaned forward, curious. Charlie's story is about finding someone who didn't see his scars as flaws to be fixed, but as evidence of his strength. Someone who understood that surviving trauma doesn't make you broken, it makes you a survivor. She paused, looking down at Charlie, who was watching her with complete trust in his one good eye. Charlie didn't need to be rescued from his past. He needed someone who respected his past and loved him anyway. The applause was thunderous, but Cynthia wasn't finished. Too often, we approach rescue work, whether it's animals or people, with the assumption that being damaged means being less valuable, that having scars means needing to be fixed. She gestured to Charlie. This dog has taught me that healing doesn't mean forgetting where you came from. It means finding someone who sees your scars and says, I understand. I have some too. What's the most important lesson our society needs to learn about helping trauma survivors, both human and animal? What would change if we approached rescue work differently? Leave your thoughts in the comments. After the gala, Cynthia and Charlie returned to their quiet life together. But word of their story continued to spread. The animal shelter's new trauma-informed adoption program became a model for shelters across the country. Cynthia began volunteering as an adoption counselor, helping match traumatized animals with adopters who had their own experience with survival. The secret, she would tell prospective adopters, isn't finding an animal that fits your perfect home. It's finding an animal whose broken pieces fit with your broken pieces. A year after adopting Charlie, Cynthia received a letter from a young veteran who had adopted a 3-legged dog from the shelter's trauma program. Ms. Williams, the letter read, I lost my leg to an IED in Afghanistan. When I came home, I felt like nobody understood what it was like to navigate the world differently. Then I met Rex, who's been figuring out how to walk on 3 legs his whole life. We understand each other. Thank you for showing us that sometimes the best matches are between survivors. That evening, Cynthia sat on her porch with Charlie, reading the letter aloud to him. You know what I think, Charlie? I think we didn't rescue each other. I think we recognized each other. Charlie looked up at her with his one good eye, and for the first time since she'd known him, his tail wagged without reservation. As the sun set over their quiet neighborhood, Cynthia reflected on the journey that had brought them together. 55 years of racism, abuse, and discrimination had taught her to expect rejection. 21 years in the military had taught her to survive in hostile environments. But Charlie had taught her something different, that love isn't about being perfect or unmarked by life's battles. Love is about finding someone who looks at your scars and sees evidence of your strength, not proof of your weakness. The last thing Cynthia did each night before bed was check on Charlie, who now slept peacefully on a dog bed next to her own bed. No more nightmares, no more flinching at sudden sounds. Just the quiet breathing of two survivors who had found in each other exactly what they never knew they were looking for. Someone who understood that broken doesn't mean worthless, and that sometimes the deepest healing happens when two wounded souls decide to trust each other with their pain.